A monumental episode 50 of the Bush League Huddle Fantasy Football podcast is here. We are live just in time for a glorious fantasy championship holiday week. I'm Raj, and I'm beyond honored to be joined by my co-hosts Fab and Nak on this milestone episode. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in, asked questions, call us out on bad picks. We're beyond grateful for your support. We hope you all had successful semifinal matchups, as successful as I did, where you hope you got not one, some, or all your teams to the finals. I was able to get past our boy Robbie in the Bush League Huddle semifinals. Fab, unfortunately, you succumbed to our boy Nick. Are you making the finals in the other league? In the other league, the league?
Alex? No, in both of my leagues, I went up against the person who finished first in the league and who also put up the most amount of points possible this week. So, and I had a respectable week against Nick. I put up 180 points, which in the Bush League is a pretty good amount. Nick just put up 200 points by like 130. So like I was already done and dusted before the 4:00 games even needed to come around. But it's okay. There's always next year, I guess. That's what I've been saying every year now for the last like 10 years.
So I tell my wife that I have to at least win 2 leagues to break even. So I was in 5 leagues this year. 2 out of 5, I am going to go in the finals. 3rd straight finals in the Bush League Huddle. I really would not like to be the next Buffalo Bills, so I'm hoping to take it home. But against Jaden Daniels, I am definitely the underdog. I am definitely the underdog in that matchup.
You have Anthony Richardson.
I have Michael Penix.
I don't know if
you have Michael Penix.
Do-rag Penix, man. Big Penix energy. So we're on live with Monday Night Football starting very soon, if not already, with the Packers and Saints. We had to go live today and we had to record today because obviously it's a jam-packed week of NFL football. There's going to be NFL games from Wednesday, Christmas Day, up until next Monday. So it's an awesome time in the schedule. But obviously today we'll pack in some waiver wire, some injury analysis, the usual love-hate, and any listener questions that come along. And just a quick note from a housekeeping standpoint, even though the fantasy football season is wrapping us, please stick with us as we roll into the NFL playoffs. We're going to have picks and prop bets. Then we're going to move on to, obviously, the Super Bowl, free agency, the draft, and then we'll get back to the preseason. And I know we all miss fantasy. We're all going to miss fantasy football so much. So obviously, stick with us. You'll be able to find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Rate, follow, and subscribe. So right away, we're going to jump into the injuries. We'll go quickly. Guys, feel free to chime in on any of these. But there's been a lot of talk about Josh Allen. He has an elbow injury, and he also has the non-throwing broken hand. I don't know how much it affected him yesterday, but he didn't have that great of a game. Typically what he used to. It seemed like he was misfiring a few times. So we'll have to monitor that front. There was obviously Jalen Hurts concussion that I think definitely affected the Eagles. Sure, there was some drop passes, but Kenny Two Gloves showed his true form. Did not look good at all. Drake London had a hamstring. I know, Fab, you were looking at this because you have Drake London or had Drake London on your team, but you were saying that he looks like he should be ready to go, and it was more of a precautionary measure.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. Apparently, if the game wasn't out of hand like it was against the Giants, which is typically the case whenever anyone goes up against the Giants, that he could have re-entered the game if required. So there's pretty good chances he plays in week 17. So keep an eye out for that.
And then there was CeeDee Lamb. There was a lot of, that game was, it was an interesting game. Cowboys played really well. They continued to look good with Cooper Rush. I know Chris Collinsworth was really talking up CeeDee Lamb regarding the fact that, he was playing tough. He kept catching passes. He was falling on his shoulder. It looked like he re-injured the shoulder as well, but it got to give it up to CeeDee Lamb. Could it be very easy just to kind of quit on the season? And for me personally, I hope he continues next week into the finals as I have him, as he was one of my mainstays. But you'll have to just factor that in for next week with CeeDee Lamb.
I think his quote today was, "I'm putting my body on the line for my guys." Like,
yeah,
he's gonna keep going till the end of the season, until if his arm comes out of his socket, that's when he'll stop potentially. But other than that, the guy's gonna go to the end, which is, you know what, you like to see.
Yes,
he did get paid. You get paid a lot of money to be on
Yep.
the field, regardless of what the season is right now. And you gotta. I definitely gotta give it to, CeeDee Lamb.
Not what people expect out of CeeDee Lamb. I feel like there's some weird aura that like he's a diva, prima donna, takes plays off, but you love to see him continue to play when the season is not basically, but is done. Kenneth Walker III, mainstay on the injury report. I feel like this guy's injured every single year. Another ankle injury. Make sure you have Zach Charbonnet. If he's somehow still on waivers, pick him up. James Conner, relatively healthy all year. He has a knee injury.
It was bound to happen.
It was bound to happen.
Dude, and he's been killing it, man, the last few games too. He's been putting up 25, 30 points every single week, man. You hate to see that.
Fantastic season. I read that it may be a season ender, but we'll have to see on that front. J.K. Dobbins, not an injury, but he's designated for return, our league winner, Bush League Huddle's league winner. I would tread lightly on that front, but his 21-day practice window is opening up. And very unfortunate news, Tank Dell with the dislocated kneecap. Very sad to hear that. It's been a really tough go ahead for him the last 2 seasons, despite a really promising rookie year. And just lastly, Deontay Johnson was claimed by Houston. 3 teams in 1 season has to be record, guys.
I don't know if it's a record, but I think it's probably 3 is probably the number. I think.
Yeah.
There's never been more than. I don't think there's ever been more than that. But 3, I think it's obviously uncommon for sure. But
the year that hold on a second, the year that Randy Moss got traded from the Patriots to the Raiders, and then he went from the Raiders to
Titans.
There's also what's his name? It just happened now. Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield.
Oh yeah,
3 teams in 1 year.
Cam Akers was another.
Cam Akers was going to be another one
too.
that I mentioned. Yeah. But Baker went from the Browns to the Rams to somewhere else. Did he end up
to Carolina?
Carolina, that's it. Browns, Carolina, and Rams.
And then Rams, yeah.
In any case, as Nak always says, when you leave Pittsburgh, you become a bit player.
Did he leave Pittsburgh? Or we're talking about Deontay, sorry.
Deontay, yeah, Deontay.
Grass is not always greener.
Exactly.
And before you go on, Raj, I have to say, friend of the pod just scored a touchdown as we speak. Mr. Dontavian Wicks.
Oh my god! I thought you were gonna say Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We have many friends.
He's out tonight, actually.
We have many friends of the pod.
Yeah.
Speaking of friends of the pod, our boy Caden Ross is live in the chat. He has a question, Caden. So I'm assuming you made the fantasy finals. You're asking if you should start DK, Metcalf, Jameson Williams, Tyjae Spears, or Kendre Miller for next week. Fab, what do you think?
First of all, shout out Caden. Thank you very much for always engaging on TikTok and all that stuff and all your questions. Congrats on making it to the finals. I don't know what that feels like, so congrats to you. I don't know. DK and Jameson are always hard for me to trust from week in and week out. Kendre Miller, I can't really comment on that until I see what he does tonight. But right now, I say Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears has looked really, really good. I think he has the safest floor and a pretty decent ceiling for next week versus his opponent, which I'm not mistaken are the Rams, which I think Nak, you're going to get into him a little bit later.
Jacksonville, actually.
I'm sorry?
His opponent
Jacksonville,
yeah. Tyjae?
Right.
Spears, you're talking?
Spears goes up against the Rams next week.
No,
the Rams have
the Jaguars.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The Rams have the Cardinals.
The Rams have the Cardinals?
Yes,
okay. Well, sorry about that. Anyways, so the Rams
have
the Cardinals, pretty good matchup. I would go with Spears out of all those right now, but that also depends on what Kendre Miller does later on today.
We're live.
We're live, Fab. Come on. Be prepared.
Caden, actually, Nak, what do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be Tyjae Spears for me. I'll detail it in my love-hate later on in the pod. But, DK is definitely a fade for me, which I'll also mention later on in the pod. Jameson Williams, two boomer bust. You're going to get 6 points or 25. So you really want to chance it this week. And, Kendre Miller, I don't know. I feel like he's always injured too. So maybe he gets injured tonight and then you're screwed. So
I would rank them in terms of like floor and ability to kind of at least have a decent game. Tyjae, Jameson, DK, and Kendre. But I would agree with Tyjae Spears. Like he looks to have a really good floor, and he looks like he's in. Tony Pollard's back in a committee again. Thanks for that question, Katie. We actually have another question from Jackson, who just joined the chat. Thoughts on starting Kyler Murray in lineup now that Cardinals are out of the playoffs? Nak, I know you were high on Kyler Murray early on this year. Maybe you want to take first and see what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, I pegged him to be top 5 QB fantasy wise. And honestly, early on, it looked like he might have a chance to get there. Lately has not looked great. Been running around a lot. The team on itself has not looked great, right? A couple of bad losses lately. It seems to be unmotivated, or I don't know. I don't know what happened to that team. We gave them high praise a few weeks ago. Look, he still has the potential to put up 20 plus points on any given week, and I know that they play the Rams tough. They love playing the Rams as an opponent. So I think depending on who your backup would be to Kyler Murray, I think, and because on the wire you're not going to really find much maybe over Kyler's ability with his potential. So I think I'm still starting Kyler Murray even though they're out of the playoffs, because they're going to want to try to knock the Rams out of the playoffs, right?
Fab.
He's not expected to be rested. He's playing. So if he's playing, he's in my lineup if I need him to be there. And the last time he played against the Rams, I know it was in week 2 of the fantasy season, but he did put up 31 points. So it's a good matchup.
Yeah, Jackson, I'm assuming you're in a 1 QB league, which in that case, depending on who's on the waiver wire, stick around. We have a few QBs actually that we're going to talk about in our love-hate.
Yeah.
If you're in a 2 QB league, for sure, like you're starting Kyler Murray. If you're in a 1 QB league, I'd be curious to know who else you have in the waiver wire. Also, you have your follow-up question. Kupp only 3 targets this week. Yeah, it's really risky. I would say it feels like the Rams are going back to that. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but it feels like they're going back to that 12 personnel type of running game. Like they're really relying on Kyren Williams. And I don't know about you guys, Nak and Fab, but I was very, very, is it bearish? Bearish where I was concerned? Bearish, Is that the right term? Yeah. Bearish on Kyren this year just because of the injury history. I thought because they drafted Blake Corum as well, that was a sign that they were going to replace him. They were passing a lot early on. They were passing a lot when Puka and Cooper came back, and now it feels like they're relying way more on the running game as they're getting positive game script as well. So I do think it's concerning. Kupp is only seeing, he had like that, I think, 0 catch game against the Niners. Does it mean I'm going to sit him? Absolutely not. That is one guy I would never sit because there, as much as you're getting the 0-point games, you could easily get a 15 catch, 150-yard game that could win you your week.
Yeah, but that's 2 games in a row now, though, right? Where he puts up really, really tough numbers. Even against the Jets last week, he put up 5.4 points, only 3 targets. I don't know, man. Like if you're in the championship game right now, it's not because of Cooper Kupp, and then you have to tell yourself, like, what other options are there for you to start instead of him? At least gives you a better floor than 5 point. I know,
Jackson, you're listening to someone who benched Breece Hall and who faced someone who benched Terry McLaurin in the finals.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I should, and you know what? And I should have benched Drake London instead, and that was on me.
Most probably no, guys. Cooper Kupp is starting.
It's a legitimate question,
lineup.
though. It's a legitimate question.
As I mentioned, Arizona plays them tough. It's a division game. They're likely going to have to rely on some passing. There's no chance if Cooper Kupp is on my fantasy team that I'm benching him this week. There's no way he goes 3 weeks putting up a dud like this. Impossible.
I agree. Agreed. Okay, so we'll move on to some waiver wire pickups. Obviously, if questions still come in, we'll answer those as they come through. So waiver wires week 17, it's kind of hard to really try to pinpoint who there is left, who is worthwhile to actually pick up that you're going to want to start. But this is how we see some of the interesting waiver wire pickups. Again, Bush League Huddle, we're a 2 QB league, so we obviously focus our podcast and our league on 2 QB. So this will definitely have a 2 QB focus. But there might be some guys you may want to play even in 1 QB leagues.
Yep.
So just quickly, in terms of waiver wire QBs, Drake May, 16% owned. He's another 20-point game. He's been consistently at 20 points over the past few weeks. Bryce Young, 29 points against the Cardinals. And he gets the league worst Bucs defense in week 17. So that could be a very nice streaming option, even for a 1 QB league, potentially, depending on who you have. Cooper Rush has looked fantastic. We even mentioned it last week that hard to see a difference between him and Dak Prescott. However, you have to beware for that week 17 game against Philly. That's one to avoid, I would say. Michael Penix Jr. I don't know what you guys thought about him. I thought he looked solid in his debut. Looked way better than Kirk Cousins. And I think the Commanders matchup is a decent one in a 2 QB league, depending on who you have. Any quick thoughts on that one?
There's no way I'm playing Michael Penix in the
100%. He's not in my
even 2
lineup
QB
anymore.
league, eh?
0% chance. 2 QB league, could be 3 QB league, and I'm.
I would start. I would easily start Bryce Young over Penix.
Yeah, and not to say. No, that's a no-brainer. I think,
and I would even consider starting Rush over Penix with a tougher matchup.
I think I'm even starting Mac Jones over Penix.
Yeah, even Mac Jones.
To tell you the
too.
truth.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not going to say he didn't look good. Yeah. He looked good. Still a rookie.
Yeah, exactly.
Now they're in first place in the division. All of a sudden, there's a lot of pressure. It's just rookie midseason like this. There's just guys that are. There's a lot more guys that are there, right? Like if these guys are all on the waivers, like he's bottom of the totem pole for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you guys. Moving on to running backs, we talked about Tyjae Spears, still 56% owned, averaged 23 points the last 2 games, and he gets the Jaguars' brutal defense in week 17. Kendry Miller, we'll have to see what happens tonight against the Packers. Kamara is out week 17, and he may be shut down for the season. We got our boys from the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Worth a speculative ad for Dobbins if someone in your league dropped him, but it'd be very risky to play him considering he just got back from a knee injury. I think the Trey Benson one is an interesting one. They get the Rams week 17. Rams have lately been a bit more vulnerable against the run than the pass. That's another one that might be risky, but if James Conner is fully out and you don't have as many good options, could be an interesting play as well. At the wide receiver position, Adam Thielen, as steady as they come. He's the wide receiver, 17 over the last 4 weeks, and he had another touchdown. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver 26 over the last 4 weeks, 15 points per game in that stretch, 45% owned. To me, he's a guy you have to get, and I think he's very worthwhile, either WR3 or flex play. Nak, what do you think of Hollywood Brown, 32% owned, 8 targets his first game back versus Pittsburgh, week 17. They have the Christmas Day game. They got the Christmas Day game against Pittsburgh, week 17. Excuse me.
Yeah, look, I was shocked that he got that many targets in his first game. I think he actually saw more than Hopkins and looks better than Hopkins has lately, or how much they're playing Hopkins, which always was weird to me. Pittsburgh 2 top corners could be out in week on Christmas Day. For sure, Joey Porter Jr. is going to be out, and then there's Dante Jackson, who may or may not play. So you'd have Corey Trice, who would be there, second-year player who missed this whole first year and the majority of this season, and James Pierre, who's really just a backup CB in the league. So, I think he has a chance to be a real contributor. And honestly, if it was his first game back, I'd say pump the brakes. But with what I saw on Sunday, or on Saturday, should I say, I wouldn't. If you need wide receiver help and he's available, I'd definitely someone I'd be looking at.
Yeah, don't disagree with that. And then there's Wan'Dale Robinson. This is another tough one, maybe more so for deeper leagues. I just thought it was interesting. 32 targets last 3 games, and they're facing a Colts defense that got pretty brutalized against the Titans in week 16. We'll move on to the tight ends. My boy Chiga Kwankwo finally showing a lot of signs of life. Back-to-back 10 target games, 13 and 19 points over the last 2 weeks. gets the Jacksonville Jaguars week 17. I think that's worth a definite add as well. We have another question actually from Caden. While we were talking about Tyjae Spears and Jalen McMillan on the waivers, Caden, you were asking who'd you go over between those two guys, Tyjae or Jalen? Fab, what do you think?
That's tough. I think if in a PPR, I think I have to go Jalen on that one. But it's a very, very, very tough call. Jalen though has been on fire lately. I think he's even turned into the Chris Godwin role that exists within the offense prior to Chris Godwin getting injured. You can really see him blowing up from that too. I think it would have to be McMillan, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, I feel like the only issue with McMillan for me right now with 2 games left, there's only what does Evans need in terms of yards to hit that 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons? Like, you got to think that they're going to want to give him that, right? Ty Jerry Rice, it would be huge for him. These are the type of records that like a QB is really going to try to attain for you. So that would be the only concern on the McMillan factor. But I mean, look, Tyjae still has Pollard in the backfield, but I don't know. This is a tough call. This is one of those where you maybe flip a coin and you see how you're feeling that morning.
Yeah.
Caden, I'd also be curious to see who else you have in those spots, either at the flex or WR3 positions, because there's, depending on who you have, it might be a good opportunity to play both of them. But I don't know your full lineup exactly right now. Yeah,
agreed.
So we'll go back to the tight ends. We mentioned Chigaquanquo, 6% owned, definitely worth a good flyer, and I think startable against the Jacksonville Jaguars week 17. Will Dissly, close to returning, and he gets the Pats, who are the 4th ranked D versus tight ends, bottom of the league, in that front. And then against Hunter Henry, he's been very steady. Patriots, for the Patriots, 8 targets in 4 of his last 5 games, 14 points versus the Bills in week 17. Last but not least, the defenses are super important. I picked up the Falcons last week, started them against the Giants, got 27 points from them, likely got me to the finals because of that, because I only got 7 points from Michael Penix. So whoever you could pick up on defense or even at kicker, which we won't talk about, Fab, if you want to talk about, you can. But whoever you pick up on defense can have a huge impact. So the Colts defense, we're going to pick on the Giants again. The Colts defense is 47% owned. They get the Giants week 17. The Giants are giving up the most fantasy points to defenses in the league thus far. There's the Miami defense as well.
Shocker.
They're going to be playing.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Tommy, is it DeVito back or is it Locke?
Yeah, Locke is finished. I think he's getting an MRI.
Yeah, Dable's been non-committal on who the starter is going to be this week because Locke is getting an MRI. So I guess we're going to see.
Call
what's
him,
the QB? What's the QB 4 there on the team? What's his name?
Tim Boyle.
Yeah, him.
Boyle.
Yeah.
What a mess.
It's a dumpster fire. Honestly, it's pathetic. It's pathetic.
12 in a row. They're slated to lose 12 in a row by the end of the season.
Good. Lose them all. Good.
Lose them all.
Shedeur.
Or Cam.
Well,
yeah, that's
Jalen.
Mara might not want the, as you mentioned earlier today, I think the black QB. Yeah.
God rest his soul. I still think they should have drafted Dwayne Haskins instead of Daniel Jones. New Jersey kid.
Yeah, that was a nice story. It was a really nice story
Yeah. And he was pissed when they didn't draft him.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the defenses. So the Miami defense will face the Browns in week 17. The Bengals had 21.5 points versus the Browns offense in week 17. So that'll be definitely a defense to target. And in the Saints defense, they get the Raiders week 17. The Raiders are allowing 10.5 fantasy points to defenses this year. So the Saints are at 41% owned. So that'll be it for the waiver wire pickups. Now we're going to move on to our very popular love-hate segment. So week 16, love-hate. We're going to go through our record. We were 8-3 collectively. A few asterisks. I had Romeo Dobbs, so he's playing now. So we don't know if that's a win or a loss. But going through it, we went 5-1 in our loves. We hit on Drake May, where he had 20 points. We hit on Jalen McMillan, the mostly talked about Jalen McMillan today with 17 points. Cooper Rush played really well, got 16 points for Fab. Devontae Smith was our only loss, where he had 11 points in a really brutal drop that might have gotten the Eagles a victory. Knack sneaked in with Jalen Warren with 15 points with a nice win there, and I think he'll be a nice start for the last week or two of the fantasy playoffs. And a beautiful pick and call by Knack on Xavier Worthy, 21 points. He's really coming on to his own to be potentially that main target in KC.
Looking good to win your bet on that one, Raj.
Yeah, we're gonna have to tally that. Yeah, we're gonna have to tally that one up on a weekly basis. So the other asterisks, I picked Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne as my hates. The way I did it was that collectively their projection, both of them, was at 19 points. Collectively, their real life score was 15 points. Etienne got 5, and I believe Bigsby got like 10.10. I am calling that a win. I am getting some slack. I'm getting some slack with my.
I'll give you 0.5 if you want, because one of them beat their projections. I'll give you or lost out on their projections. I'll give you 0.5 max. You can't call both and then use collective projections.
Did one of them win?
What
does
the jury
lose?
think?
Did one of them make their projections and another one didn't? Is that it?
Correct.
Yes.
So then he's a loss.
Okay, so if Fab goes all out loss, I would give okay, but look, my reasoning.
You called them both. They both have to miss their projections. As
my reasoning to saying that this is not an all-out win is that you're not starting both Bigsby and Etienne. You would have never started both at the same time. So collective projections shouldn't really count. That's how I see it. If we're keeping ourselves honest.
If you're calling the entire backfield has to underperform.
Order.
Not collectively.
Order in the court.
You're getting a 0.5 max.
Order in the court. I'm keeping it as a win. Romeo Dobbs. Romeo Dobbs pending.
We just lost our listeners.
Romeo Dobbs is pending, so we'll see how he does tonight.
He's got one catch for 15 yards on one target so far.
Now everything's going to Wicks now, of course, just like everyone expected.
Packers wide receiver, I don't agree with you all the time, Knack, but I agree with you now with Packer wide receivers. Screw him. Jerry Jeudy was a fantastic call, Fab. I was very skeptical on that front. Fantastic call. 4 points. DTR. I heard that Jameis Winston was the emergency QB.
Yeah.
That is wild.
But look, that's what, because it's hard to bet. I know, first of all, it's weirder because he was the backup, like to Watson. But usually when a QB gets demoted, he goes to that QB 3 emergency spot. Usually that's how it's been looking like around the league. So that's why I wasn't like totally shocked. But he was the backup. So like, why would he not just regain the backup role, right? Yeah. Who was the backup then? Who else did they have?
No idea. I didn't even know who the other QB is on that team.
I think they had to promote someone, maybe, potentially. Interesting.
It doesn't matter. I was gonna look it up, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly. It doesn't matter.
Fab, you had a lot. You had 2 losses actually. So there was Lad McConkey, who you had put before Thursday night. That was a
close. I was close.
0.10 point loss, I think. And
it wasn't as horrible as a call as everyone made it out to seem, but it wasn't tough.
What did he finish with?
I think like
because you said it was he was borderline flex wide receiver 3, right?
Yeah, so 14.7 points should put him in the wide receiver 3.
Let me check.
I would think.
In the meantime,
yes,
we had put
wide receiver 24. He finished as.
So that's wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we had
wide receiver 25, so wide receiver 3. So that's a win basically because DK Metcalf got 14.7 as well.
But we're doing on projections.
I'll take the loss.
I know. We
go to the jury on this. I'll take the loss.
I just remembered what he's like borderline WR3.
Unlike some people on the podcast, I own my losses. Okay, it's fine. don't try to look at, no, it's all my losses. It's okay, guys. It's okay. Jerry Jeudy, 4 points. Happily take that win. Thank you very much.
It was a good win.
And Geno Smith, I thought he would struggle too against the Vikings, but he had a really he had a nice game.
Yeah.
A lot of volume. Geno
until that last pick.
Geno
at the
feels
end.
like empty calories lately. Like the way he plays, it's a lot of yards, it's a lot of passing. At the end of the day, there's not a lot of wins lately. I'm starting to be a bit down on him. And I think next year there might be a QB change in Seattle. Knack, great call on Isaiah Pacheco as well. 4 points. You called that one. You called that one as a loss, and it looks like he's going to be splitting some time with Kareem Hunt. On the flip side, the Jamison Williams, that was a loss. He had 26 points.
I got J-mode.
Yeah, he. It's hard to know when the JMO game is coming.
Yeah,
I think we all did at one point or another in the season this year.
And that was the third time. I really had to play the odds here, but it was only the third time they allowed double-digit points to 2 wide receivers on the season. So
yeah,
I got J-mode.
So that's it for our love-hate for week 16, 8-3 record. Fab, kick us off with a championship edition, week 17. Let's win people some championships, Fab.
Well, this guy probably got a lot of our listeners into the championship ground. Bo Nix at Bengals. Bo Nix gets a Bengals defense giving up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season and the most rushing attempts, 2 QBs this season. The 2 QBs this season as well with 97. Bo has been a no-brainer starter in almost every format, but you have to love this matchup even more in your championship game. He's beat out his projections in the last 2 games straight, and the last week he put on a heater versus a tough Chargers defense. Start him up, enjoy the points flow in, and just make sure to give us a little bit of thanks when you win your championship. He's an easy QB1 for me this week. He's a top 12 start. He's been lights out as a rookie. Like, apart from Jaden Daniel, he's the only person, in my opinion, that deserves any sort of conversation as part of QBs are concerned. Drake, me too, but Bo Nix has been doing a lot. And you think of the situation that he went into as well, right? In Denver, they just got rid of Russell Wilson. He had no idea what to expect. He started off rough. He's been doing really well.
That's a huge game too.
Yeah.
If the Bengals trying to stay alive and they have to beat Denver, and if they don't, then Denver has KC in week 18 that they would have to win. Like, this was a massive one. This is a must watch for me.
This is a Saturday game, no?
Saturday, yeah.
Oh, love Saturday games.
I love.
There's 3 of them. And all of them have playoff implications. If I remember correctly. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Fab.
You're welcome, Ethan. We're gonna.
Yeah, you're second. I believe you have a stack.
I got a stack, baby.
Let's go.
Stack. Put it in DFS too. Why not? This isn't DFS podcast, but it could be one day. Courtland Sutton at the Bengals again. When it rains, it pours, and that's going to be the case for TDs this week for Bo's favorite target. Bengals defense has allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points to our receivers the last 4 games, but heavily skewed with playing the Browns last week with DTR, like I mentioned, who had a great game with Jerry Jeudy, and the Titans the week before with their QB dumpster fire. So on top of that, Sutton has had a very steady floor with 8 straight games above double-digit fantasy points, but we don't want safety. We want points this week. So fire up Sutton, since he'll be catching all those TD passes from Bo this week. Like I mentioned, see above, please. The Bengals play an above-average rate of man, and Sutton is very efficient, averaging 0.6 fantasy points per route run versus man. All the more reason to get him in your lineups. He's a wide receiver 2 for me with wide receiver 1 upside. Sutton and Bo. Nice stack. Very good. Very, very, very good matchup versus the Bengals. It's going to be a high-scoring affair. This is a very interesting QB wide receiver tandem that can win a lot of people championships.
Yeah. No issues with your loves this week.
I like it.
Knack, what do you got for us?
Yep. So I've got Pat Freiermuth versus the Chiefs on Christmas Day, so 2 days away. He's been very quiet with Pickens out of the lineup, and even Arthur Smith even said they called many plays for him as the first read last week and the week before, but it just wasn't there. With Pickens logging a full practice today, he seems set to return on Christmas. So The Chiefs are actually giving up the fourth most points to tight ends and are just a few weeks removed from giving up 30 to Brock Bowers. So look for the Steelers to get Freiermuth involved early and often, and I like him to find the end zone as well in a game the Steelers must have after dropping 2 straight. And I think, honestly, even if Pickens does play, he's going to be a lot more decoy-ish than anything, I believe. I think he's still battling that hamstring, and even with that full participation, like I don't think he's going to be full go. Like I don't see like 80% of the snaps,
I think Pat has been playing better with Pickens in the lineup.
Yes,
because
that's what I'm saying. It takes the edge
Everyone
off
is.
of exactly. Everyone, you're exactly exactly what he said. Everyone is, and people know, right? Like he's the red zone target too. Like Arthur Smith alluded to that as well. And it's just like when you have Pickens in the game, there's just more room for everyone else, and I think he's going to be the benefactor of that.
Nak, I'm curious. Would you start Freiermuth over the likes of TJ Hawkinson or Dalton Kincaid or Tucker Kraft?
I think Tucker Kraft, yes, because we're staying away from Green Bay. Even Hawkinson, I would, even like Kincaid too. Like Kincaid has he been really consistent? Not really.
Injured
And
too.
And Hawkinson, like
floor, but his floor is very low.
Hawkinson hasn't been all that consistent either, and everything is going to JJ and Addison these days. Like with Aaron Jones sprinkled in the run game. So yeah, I think I am. I think this is a game where they're going to get him really involved. I think he for sure catches a touchdown pass in the red zone. There's no Chris Jones either for KC, which makes a huge difference in the pass rush rush game. So, I think
this is a big game for the Steelers. Like they're not locked
in.
They're not
for both. No, Steelers have made the playoffs.
They made the playoffs. Okay.
Yeah. No, but for both, right?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah,
the Bills kept winning. So, it's just for seeding, really. They're projected to be either 3rd or 5th, is what they're saying that they'll finish, because they have the tiebreaker versus the Chargers and the Broncos, because they beat them both this year.
The Chiefs already locked up the first round bye, right?
No,
the Bills. It's them and the Bills.
It's them and the Bills.
Still very much.
They have to win. They have to win one game.
Because the Bills have the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
gotcha.
The Bills have the head-to-head.
Head-to-head. Yeah. Nak, give me your second love of championship week.
Yes, so it's the aforementioned Tyjae Spears at the Rams. He's put together 2 solid weeks, as we just spoke about. He was actually RB3 in week 15 and RB10 in week 16. He's also been seeing the majority of the snaps between him and Pollard. So he's been now snapping him 56% in week 15 and 61% in week 16. He's also scored 3 TDs in that span. So now he gets a Jaguars D in the fantasy football finals, and he has given up 13 plus fantasy points to patch catching backs in the past 6 weeks. So the likes of Madison, Hall, Gibbs, Montgomery, just to name a few. He's also become the short yardage back as well. There's being seeing a lot of him inside the 10. And I like him to go out and put up another solid stat line and find the end zone again against the Jaguars. Get him in your lineups.
I'm happy that he is carving out a role. I had Derrick Henry all of last year, and I owned Spears all of last year. And when he would get sprinkled in, which was a lot of third downs, he looked electric. So I'm surprised. I know he had concussions this year, and I know he was injured. So I'm happy that they're sprinkling him in more, because I don't think Tony Pollard is an every down back.
They both aren't.
No, exactly. Exactly.
We saw that last year with Dallas for Tony Pollard. He's not every down back. He can't be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. No, they definitely both aren't. And look, he's not really getting it done on the ground.
Quick correction, guys. Quick correction. It's Tony Pollard.
Sorry.
Oh,
thank you.
Pollard.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
We got to keep ourselves honest.
But he's not getting it done on the ground, really. Like he's got like 2.8 yards per carry, I think, last week, and similar to the week before. But he's getting a lot of catches, and then like I said, the touches inside at the goal line definitely help
Yes. And I know you alluded to it, Knack. Jaguars, 82 receptions allowed to running backs this year. That is the third most in the league.
There we go.
Quickly, Rico Dowdle or Spears?
This week?
Rico Dowdle against Philly. Yeah, Rico Dowdle against Philly. Spears against the Jags.
Spears.
Yeah, that's what I thought. My first love of championship week will be Darnell Mooney at the Commanders. So the Falcons offense looked very functional with Michael Penix Jr. 6 targets, 5 catches, and 82 yards for Mooney, despite a relatively negative game script for the Falcons passing game. And Mooney was second in target share at 22% behind Drake London's 29. The Commanders are pretty much middle of the pack on defense against receivers over the last 4 weeks, but Mooney has been very steady versus man and zone, which Washington mixes up pretty evenly. I think more than anything, I really like the connection between Penix and Mooney, and he's been at 6+ targets in the last three of the last 4 games. I'd start him over the likes of Roma Dunze, Josh Downs, and even Marvin Harrison Jr., who I may or may not be talking about later. I think I like him like WR3 flex territory, which he's at, I believe, 60 catches, 955 yards this year. He's had a very, very good season. Yeah, I really liked him so far this year.
I like it.
Can't complain on that. Yep.
Just a little update for Love Hate. 2 catches, 20 yards now for Dobbs.
WR1 territory, baby. Do the Packers need do they need a wide receiver, like a top dog wide receiver while we're on them?
Nope.
You don't think so?
Well,
it's working. It's for fantasy. It's just not working, right?
No, they're all flawed players.
I guess.
Yeah, they're all B+ players.
They all have their.
They don't have their.
They don't have their CD Lamb or their Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Like,
it reminds me of the wide receiver core when Favre was the quarterback. I don't know if you guys remember like Antonio Freeman.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Like he was like solid, but they never had like a Hall of Fame wide receiver until then Aaron Rodgers came in and they had like Jordy Nelson borderline.
I mean,
and
I don't think
they had
Donald Driver. I don't think they need one, but it wouldn't hurt if they ended up getting an alpha guy over there that can target all the time.
They just don't seem like a very refined wide receiver group. They all like Watson and Wicks have like
Watson has hands. Wicks has a catch issue. Watson is only good down. He's only good for 3 catches and 107 yards every game. Reed is a big drop off at the beginning of the season. How we started off really, really hot and then just tapered off completely. But I think Dobbs might be the most well-rounded out of all of them, to be honest with you. But it doesn't mean he's not. No, he's not.
And I think, that's what I mentioned at the beginning of the year. I thought Dobbs was the de facto number 1 guy there this year because he does have the build. He has everything that a WR1
he seems to be the most well-rounded, well put together.
Somehow Knack's take on Dobbs is actually looking valid. It went from looking great, then it looked bad, looked great, then it looked bad. Now it's looking good again. Second hate for me, second love for we're talking about hate. The Packers are receivers that we hate so much, and I'm already moving to hates. Second love for me this week on championship weekend is Anthony Richardson versus the Giants. We know the Giants are tanking, have lost 10 in a row, and they looked awful against the Falcons.
Awful.
It hasn't always looked good for Anthony Richardson. We would agree with that. But since his benching in week 11, he's the QB9 with 21 fantasy points per game. And he faces a Giants defense over the last 4 weeks that has given up the 8th most fantasy points to QBs and almost 40 rushing yards per game. To me, AR is an absolute lock and loaded must start in any format. So, Caden, you were talking about Kyler Murray. I would start Anthony Richardson over Kyler Murray. I would start him over Brock Purdy, over Tua. Dare I say, I'd even start him over Jordan Love if you're in a 1 QB league. 5 rushing TDs and almost 10 carries per game in 5 of his last 6 make up for his poor passing, which he's still good for 1 to 2 deep shots per game. So fire up, Mr. Anthony Richardson. 5 of 8, 100 yards, 1 TD, 15 carries, 60 yards. 3 touchdowns.
And then he woke up.
I may or may not have Anthony Richardson.
You may or may not have a vested interest in Anthony Richardson next week.
I may or may not.
This is actually the softest defense he plays all year, huh? Next week against the Giants. He's had a pretty tough schedule if you think about it from a QB standpoint. I don't hate this call.
Guys,
He's just not a great QB.
Yeah, not at all. Like,
he's a great athlete. He's a great athlete. Just
like,
not a great QB.
Mind you, they're using him like Cam Newton. It's a lot like Cam Newton year 1, like read option down the goal line. But like even Cam Newton was more accurate than this.
The thing that gets me is that when like last week he against Tennessee he threw 11 times. Like that's all you need, I guess, when
he can. But Jonathan Taylor also ran for 200 something yards, right?
Yeah, 189 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think that's what the number was.
It was more. I think it was 200. I think it was over 200.
He hit 200.
Yeah, I think it was like 228 or something.
The worst part is that everyone who drafted Jonathan Taylor probably didn't make the playoffs.
But guys, like I'll just end on this and I'll move on. 38 pass attempts for Richardson week 15 against Denver, and they were in that game. Like, why are you throwing the ball 38 times with Anthony Richardson? And their defense has actually they've been good on takeaways. They haven't necessarily been good yardage wise, but they've been good on takeaways and pressuring the passer. Now moving on to the hates. Fab, who is your first hate for week 17?
My first hate for week 17 is we mentioned him earlier, Rico Dowdle. Actually, I'm fading him big time against Philly at Philly. Rico has been great for fantasy managers this year, no doubt. He's taken over the lead back role admirably from Zeke Elliott, but the test versus the division rival Philly, who are still in the hunt for the coveted first-round bye, especially since Hurts is in the concussion protocol, and whose D give up the least amount of fantasy points to running backs. We've seen bruiser type of backs have decent games, but no amount of carries for Dowdle, in my opinion, will help him beat his projections this week. I expect him to salvage his day, maybe in the PPR game, but nothing beyond that. I'm fading him big time this week. He's an RB2 at best, more of a flex play, but tough sledding for Rico.
And he hasn't been catching many passes. They haven't been throwing to him often. He's not like they don't really go to him in the passing game.
5 receptions against the Bucks last night. Just off the top of my head,
3 receptions for 28 yards. But I know the game before that, I don't think he saw one, or he saw one target. He's not like huge in the passing game, so like you're relying a lot of him rushing. So I definitely like this call for sure.
You know, I was watching him play last night. You know who he reminds me of a little bit? Marion Barber. Similar build, similar style running.
Interesting.
Like, Dallas player too, obviously. That's why I had the commonality. But I was like, it looks like Marion Barber a little bit. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, I wasn't
anything else?
Sure. Maybe
anything else?
Jeez, what else is there? What else can I be thinking? Is there something else that I can?
They both wear glasses. Serious question, guys. Where are we drafting Rico Dowdle next year?
I mean, comfortably top 20 running back.
Oh yeah.
Comfortably. I would even venture too far as. I think when you get to the 15, that's where it gets a little bit muddy for me, because that's where you get guys like I think like James Cook is in around that area.
There's going to be a lot of guys that run up the
I was going to say like the Chase Browns of the world are going to be running up a little bit too.
Bucky Irving.
Yeah, Bucky
Those
Irving.
are going to go up the pyramid.
Yeah, like the Najees are going down.
Sure.
Stevensons are going down.
Yeah.
Stevensons are going down big time. Yeah.
I hope Seattle moves with Charbonnet eventually, and then you have to factor in Ashton Genty.
Yep.
Fab, who's your second hate for this week?
I might get a little bit of hate for this, but it is what it is, I suppose. Drake London at Washington. Drake London, wide receiver 30 in the last 4 weeks. He hasn't topped 100 receiving yards since week 5 when the Falcons played. You guessed it, the Bucks. Sure, Penix can't be much worse than Cousins, and he showed flashes last week versus the Giants, but apart from that, it was a little underwhelming in my opinion. Week 17, he faces Washington in a heavy, and Drake London faces Washington in a heavy dose of Lattimore. And Washington have been pretty good versus X-type receivers, notwithstanding A.J. Brown last week. Washington play a little bit more zone than man coverage, and the differences of yards per route run for Drake is staggering. 0.38 for zone versus 0.81 for man. Drake has a very solid floor, but in the big game, you might need to chase some more upside. I don't see Drake as better than a wide receiver 3 or even flex play, considering more interesting matchups out there like Jacoby Myers, Lai McConkey, Sutton, like I mentioned, and Jalen McMillan. Oh, and he's dealing with a hamstring injury as well. He's expected to play. Just looking at some comments about how, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, he could have played that game if he needed to. He could have gone back in the game versus the Giants if he needed to. But typically, these types of soft tissue injuries, they could linger. So if it does crap up again during the game, could be something to take into account as well.
Lattimore is actually hurt too.
He got hurt again?
Mm-hmm.
He played the whole game.
He left towards the end of it, I believe.
Well, all the same.
Yeah.
All the same. I'm not a fan of Drake London versus Washington this week. It's too bad because he has
now you don't like him now that you're out of the fantasy playoffs.
To be honest with you, I started him last week, and I was like, you know what, like I'm just like risk it, no biscuit. You know, like Penix is gonna come in. He does push the ball downfield a lot more than Cousins, I find, and I guess that's why it's more of a benefit to Mooney, I think, than maybe to Drake London. But
Breece Hall. That was
Breece Hall. Like, there's so much like unknown. Is he splitting carries? Is he not splitting carries? I was like, you know what? I don't want to deal with that headache. And
Drake London's future for me is like if he gets a good QB, because he hasn't had one in 3 years. His future to me is Mike Evans, like ball winning deep shot guy who could overpower guys.
I see,
but he needs a good QB for that.
He does, but he's been super steady the entire season. Like if you look at the first 10 weeks, like those are money numbers. It's just the last like few weeks where he hasn't been playing up to his potential, I suppose. And with the change in QB and also with the tough matchup too, I'm not a big fan of him this week.
Agreed. Thank you, Fab. Nak, who do you have as your first hate for week 17?
Yep. First hate for me is going to be Jake Ferguson at the Eagles, another Dallas player here. The passing game has surprisingly not missed a beat, though, with the loss of Dak Prescott. And in fact, it's actually looked a lot better, in my opinion, especially in fantasy. That, however, cannot be said for Jake Ferguson, who has not topped 40 yards since back in week 9 and gets a tough Eagles team, giving up the 5th least points to tight ends and have held them under 7 points in 2 of the last 3 games. After a heartbreaking loss, Philly is going to be fired up, and there should be much better options to consider in the fantasy finals. Definitely don't like Jake Ferguson.
He is. I had him last year for a vast majority of the season. He was very good last year.
He was.
He was last year.
I would agree that has not been as good of a year. Nak, who do you have as your second hate?
Yeah, last but not least, I've got DK Metcalf at the Bears. So he's had a miserable season to date. I think everyone can kind of agree with that. He's definitely not the first option in this offense anymore, and he's been held to 4 receptions or fewer in 5 straight games and has not gone over 66 yards in that span. He did find the end zone. Man. Yeah, that's incredible. When I read up on these stats, I was really shocked. But he did find the end zone to save his fantasy day in week 16, but don't expect that to continue as it was his first TD since week 7. The Bears still give up the second fewest points to wide receivers, and although they've given up some big performances in the past 4 weeks, Metcalf is not named Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, or even Amon-Ra St. Brown, so he's a must-sit for me in week 17.
More than anything, Thursday night game, Seattle West Coast team traveling east or Midwest on Thursday. It's hard to trust anyone in that situation. But where do you draw the line in terms of who would you start DK over? So
I'm starting. Yeah, look, I'll go through the list. I'll start Keenan Allen over him. I'll start Thielen over him. I'll start Ridley over him. I'll start Xavier Worthy over him. And even Deebo Samuel came back to light, but I just don't like the player. Devonta Smith, no, just because Kenny Pickett might get another start, so I'd be a little bit skeptical. Maybe Khalil Shakir too over Metcalf.
Definitely Khalil Shakir. Like, Khalil Shakir before for Ridley, I think. But yeah, no, I'm with you there on that.
Oh,
Before Debo for sure.
I like
Before Debo for
Ridley.
sure.
I like Ridley
Ridley a
this week
lot.
too.
I like Ridley this week as
Nick,
well.
I really like Ridley this week.
Look, if you have to start him, he's your desperate flex play this week, or else like find someone else. Like, there's no way if you have 3 wide receiver slots, DK should not occupy one of them.
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. Last but not least, for my hates, first off, I have a Bush League Huddle favorite, Marvin Harrison Jr. at the Rams. So MHJ has not topped over 5 receptions in a game or over 60 receiving yards since week 8, and he's gone 4 out of his last 5 games without a touchdown. It is easy to think you could start him this week against the Rams based off his 4-catch, 130-yard, and 2 TD performance against LA, but that came in week 2 of the season. His impact on offense has been dwindling, and Kyler Murray, to me, looks unsettled on a week-to-week basis. And over the last 4 weeks, the Rams have given up the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, despite the shootout matchup versus the Bills, and have really showed up their pass defense since the early portion of the season. They've held their last 2 opponents to 10 points or less. I would start players like Xavier Worthy, like we mentioned, Calvin Ridley, Josh Downs over Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, I know you might have drafted him early. Be willing to miss out on that first big game that he has, because I just don't think it's coming. And he's been mediocre as a fantasy option, in my opinion.
That big game came, and it was in week 2.
No, exactly. Yeah, like
it came and it went, and we've been waiting for the second big game for
finals on the
weeks now.
line. I wouldn't put my finals on the line with him.
Yeah,
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Knack, there was a
I'd
podcaster
rather start Hollywood Brown than Marvin Harrison Jr. this week.
Knack, there was a podcaster I listened to, and he said they're using Marvin Harrison Jr. similar to how the Steelers use wide receivers, or specifically James Pickens, where they're not allowing him. Did I say James Pickens?
You did.
George Pickens, thank you. Where they're not allowing him like a super refined route tree. It's more like Pickens in his first year was just downfield routes. And that's kind of how they're using Marvin Harrison Jr. now. They don't want to put too much on his plate. I don't know if it's because he can't take that much on his plate or he doesn't want to. But not what you want to hear out of your 4th overall pick, that he's they're kind of easing him along.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, the Steelers do this. They do this a lot, and it's very frustrating. Like at the beginning of the year when they drafted Roman Wilson, like he got hurt, yes, for sure, but the plan was always to ease him in and not get, like, this team didn't have any wide receivers. Like, what was the excuse there? Like, you needed a body, you needed a guy, you drafted him in the 3rd round, like, play the guy. And to more your point, Harrison, fourth overall pick, like, there's guys like BTJ who are lighting it up right now with bigger route tree, and he was drafted in the late 1st round.
Yep.
Like, I don't know. To your point, maybe that it is. Maybe it's just not for him. Maybe he just can't handle that many, that many plays or that many. I don't know. It's strange. It's very strange.
Team that wasn't going to win a Super Bowl anyways. Like, let's be real. Like,
yeah.
This is the time you want to learn.
Yeah. That's weird. Second hate, I'm going to go the controversial route, like my friend Nat goes. I'm going to fade Joe Mixon versus the Ravens.
Ooh.
Joe Mixon has looked great this season, but his offensive line has the 5th worst run blocking rate in the league, according to PFF. When he's been able to find any creases, he's looked electric and powerful, but those creases are rare. So they've been heavily reliant on big rushing plays this year, and the lack of that has caught up to them over the past few weeks. Last 2 games in tough matchups, 10 points versus Miami, 8 versus the Chiefs, and 9.5 points against the Titans in week 12. And in week 17, he gets a Ravens defense that has given up the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs over the past 4 games. The Titans have one of the most inefficient rushing attacks in the league. So if you're in a situation where you have, let's say, like a Derrick Henry and a Chase Brown and Mixon as your running backs, and you have a solid wide receiver 2 type you could flex, I would strongly consider making that move over Mixon.
I don't hate the call. It's a hard decision to make. I feel like if you have him in your lineup,
you did it last week.
Breece Hall is not Joe Mixon this year at all. Breece Hall is not Joe Mixon this year at all.
He's not, but
bench Joe Mixon.
You're saying Joe Mixon, Fab, Nak?
No.
Oh, don't.
No.
I'm not going.
It's easy to fit. I can see you fading him, but you can't obviously bench him. But I can definitely see you fading him.
So this is what happened to me last week. I had Mixon, and I played him in a tough matchup against KC, and then Jameson Williams went off. But Jameson Williams is not one of those wide receiver 2 types that you could rely upon. If you have someone like a Lad McConkey, I would probably go with that.
Over Mixon in the flex?
Potentially.
I think I would agree with that. McConkey's floor is really good.
If you have a wide receiver, let's say, to me it's like a wide receiver in the top 20 that you can't find a way to fit in, and you can flex them over Joe Mixon, that's the move I would consider making in the finals.
They might have to rely on him a little bit more, though, right? With another wide receiver going
Great
down.
point.
Deontay Johnson now, he's come in today. They play in 2 days. He's not going to have very many. Well, I think they're going to have to play because they need bodies. They also put that Steven Sims guy on waivers, who's actually claimed by Baltimore, which is funny. So like 1 in, 1 out. So I think they're going to need a body. Mechie is coming back apparently, but you might have a handful of snaps or something just to have a body in there. So they may have to rely a little bit more on Mixon.
Would you flex in Adam Thielen over Joe Mixon this week?
Man, I love Adam Thielen.
I love
him.
So
nice in that offense.
I love a professional wide receiver. He's a bit low for me.
I think
Adam Thielen.
I think I still go Mixon.
I would still go Mixon as well. I think there's going to be a ton of Mixon. I think there's going to be a ton of Mixon questions this week because the last few weeks I was seeing a lot of them on Reddit and Twitter. But that's the strategy that I would employ. I would deploy with Mixon. That's all we have, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Episode 50 of the Bush League Huddle Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all our socials. Thank you for those who came on to join us live with some questions. It was cool. It was really fun. We'll hope to do that soon again. And listen and follow to our friends at League Champ, which is the easy-to-use tool that enables users to turn their player takes into rankings and projections. I'm Raj, and on behalf of Nak and Fab, thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out, everyone.